So a couple of months ago, I sent an email around to the regulars and said what would be useful things for me to talk about, and I'm kind of still working my way through that list. So Ed suggested um, right speech to be a topic that he'd be interested in. So I want to start. There's going to be some interactivity in this, but just so you're aware, I want to start. Actually, I want to start by asking you a question. What do you think is the most dangerous thing in the world?
The
Most dangerous thing in the world
regarding speech,
regarding the world.
the world,
The most dangerous thing in the world.
fear and ignorance.
That would be up on the list for sure.
Deceit probably is up there.
Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have given it away by saying I was going to be talking about speech because I think I'm biased the answer. I was expecting someone to say like nuclear weapons, or according to Jammeh Kunsanim, who's the patriarch of the American European Parish of the Take of Order, the most dangerous thing in the world is your 3-inch tongue, right? Your 3-inch tongue, because angry speech and poorly chosen words are almost always kind of at the root of any kind of violence or conflict. It usually starts with words and escalates from there. So speech is, in many cases, the kind of the underlying element. So what we're going to be looking at tonight is one kind of unpacking one little piece of the fourth of the Four Noble Truths, right? The idea of the Noble Eightfold Path. So the Arya Stangamarga, right? Arya noble, Stanga means eight. Marga is a path or a way, like Tao. Korean, it's a Palchongyo, Palchongdo. That's the Korean word for that. So let me just kind of quickly, right? We're going to focus on one of them, but let me kind of review the list, right? So, right views, accurately understanding kind of the true nature of things, the true nature of how the world is. Right intentions, right? Avoiding thoughts of anger and greed and ignorance. Right speech, refraining from verbal misdeeds. Right conduct, refraining from physical misdeeds. Right livelihood, avoiding trades that harm other beings. Right effort, achieving wholesome states of mind to motivate our behavior. Right mindfulness, maintaining awareness on wholesome things. And then right concentration, right, maintaining that kind of focused, one-pointed mental attention. This idea obviously goes right to the beginning of Buddhism, because the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path as an element of the Four Noble Truths is introduced in what the tradition records as the very first sermon, the very first discourse or teaching of the Buddha, the Dharma Chakra Pavartana Sutra, the setting of the wheel of Dharma in motion. That the tradition records that the Buddha Shakyamuni ran down the 5 friends that he'd been doing all this aesthetic practice with, and finds them in the deer park and says, "Here's what I figured out," right? And that's the beginning of the tradition and the beginning of the Sangha. Now, Noble Eightfold Path. The words are actually in a little bit of the wrong order there for that to really mean what it ought to mean. It really ought to be more like the Eightfold Path of the spiritually noble, or the ennobling Eightfold Path, right? The path isn't what's noble. The person who follows the path is noble. Or maybe it would be more accurate to say, by following the path, a person can become noble, right? So this is the path to being a noble person, an Aryan. Again, the topic I was asked to talk about was right speech. Samyak vach, right? Samyak, correct, right? Vach, voice, right? Related to the voice, vocal, right? Chongo, that's the Korean. The Korean's always easier. Chongo. So if you think about the Noble Eightfold Path, if we're going to call it that, right? The speech in particular is connected to some of the other elements of that, right? A person with right views will be able to use those views to distinguish between right speech and wrong speech, right? So the views will be helpful in doing that. A person with right effort will be appropriately motivated to abandon wrong speech and engage in right speech. Right mindfulness will help a person to be more attentive to monitoring their thoughts so that then they unfold into the thoughts lead to right speech and not bad thoughts that lead to wrong speech, right? So there's some connection among the elements there. Now, when you see stuff about speech, such as in the precepts, right? The precept related to speech, among the 5 lay precepts, the precept related to speech specifically is about lying, right? Honesty. And that's one of the elements of wrong speech, right? As opposed to right speech, is certainly lying, but there's other things too. So lying is the first one. Divisive speech, right? Speech that foments conflict, speech that encourages hostility or aggression or violence. Harsh speech, right? Speech that's cruel, unnecessarily strident, unnecessarily critical, right? That sort of thing. And then finally, the tradition also talks about a word I absolutely love, prattle, right? This kind of frivolous speech, silly, inane, pointless speech that's just kind of non-productive. Obviously, that's the mildest of the 4. The other 3 are worse, but that's an element of it too. Just kind of waste of time speech, pointless prattle. So if you look at the karmata, the list of wholesome and unwholesome actions, those 4 types of speech, if you look at the list of unwholesome actions, those are numbers 4, 5, 6, and 7 on the list of unwholesome actions, right? Lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, frivolous speech, right? Are 4 of the things that are on that list. The guidelines in the Pali suttas, anyway, the Pali canon texts, for things to consider when speaking are laid out in a text called the Vacha Sutta. It's part of the Anguttara Nikaya, the great big huge fat one up on the shelf up there. It's incredibly short. I'm going to read you the entirety of this sutra. This is it. Monks, a statement endowed with 5 factors is well spoken, not ill spoken. It is blameless and unfaulted by knowledgeable people. Which 5? It is spoken at the right time. It is spoken in truth. It is spoken affectionately. It is spoken beneficially. It is spoken with a mind of goodwill. A statement endowed with these 5 factors is well spoken, not ill spoken. It is blameless and unfaulted by knowledgeable people. That's it. That's the whole thing. And you could see, the 3rd paragraph almost completely duplicates the 1st paragraph. So really, it's just kind of 2 paragraphs long. That's the whole sutta. That's the whole text. So again, those are guidelines for things to consider. Is the speech that I'm thinking about delivering, appropriate? Does it follow the idea of right speech? There's another text, the Abhaya Sutta. This one's in the Majjhima Nikaya, another one of the collections in the Pali Canon. So here's just a little piece of that one. It goes into a little bit more detail that might be beneficial. In the case of words that the Tathagata knows to be unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial, or not connected with the goal, that's another translation of that, unendearing and disagreeable to others, he does not say them. In the case of words that the Tathagata knows to be factual, true, unbeneficial, unendearing, and disagreeable to others, he does not say them. In the case of words that the Tathagata knows to be factual, true, beneficial, but unendearing and disagreeable to others, he has a sense of the proper time for saying them. In the case of words that the Tathagata knows to be unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial, but endearing and agreeable to others, he does not say them. In the case of words that the Tathagata knows to be factual, true, unbeneficial, but endearing and agreeable to others, he does not say them. In the case of words that the Tathagata knows to be factual, true, beneficial, and endearing and agreeable to others, he has a sense of the proper time for saying them. Why is that? Because the Tathagata has sympathy for living beings. Now, I think it might be helpful. I want to go back. I want to go back through that. I'll have you guys think about that one for just a minute. Let's see if we can come up with examples of things that would fall under those, right? So let me back up to the beginning. So the first one was unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial, unendearing, disagreeable to others. What would be an example of something like that?
Most anything a politician says these days.
Maybe so. How would you what would qualify as something that would have those noxious characteristics?
Just false information you can find on the internet.
Yeah, they like slander, especially like slanderous, libelous, malicious lies. Pizzagate and stuff like that, right? So, okay. So the next one was factual, true, but unbeneficial, unendearing, disagreeable to others.
You have a powerful body odor.
Okay.
Might be a right time for that.
There might be a right time. Yeah, there might be a right time for that one. What I was thinking about was like, you have to think about intention here, right? So sort of an insulting truth that's just said to be cruel. If you told somebody, God, you really stink today, for the purpose of hurting their feelings, making them feel bad, being just sort of not for constructive reasons, but just sort of for the sake of being cruel, I think that would probably fit that one. Okay, so that's that one. So next one is factual, true, beneficial, but unendearing and disagreeable to others. And again, this was the one he said he has a sense of the proper time for saying them. What might be an example of that?
Confronting someone on how they're contributing to climate change or their carbon footprint or something.
That might be. There would be an appropriate time and place for that.
There
Right. Could be a appropriate time and place for that. Actually, what you said a minute ago might fit here. If it's not being said for cruel reasons, but for kind of to help the person, maybe they don't know, maybe they don't realize you're bothering other people. There might be an appropriate time. If it was done at the appropriate time and place, that would be something that could be done. If it were done at an inappropriate time and place, kind of in the wrong context, it would still be a problem, right? It would still be sort of unnecessarily harsh, hurtful. If you said it in front of other people, right, that would be bad. If you said it, got somebody off by themselves in a private context and say, hey, I don't want to hurt your feelings or anything, but just so you're aware that, then it would be the right time and place. Okay, next one. Unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial, but endearing and agreeable to others. What would be an example of that? Can you think of something that would fit that one?
Like compliments or something,
Flattery.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. Well, actually, what I thought of was like conspiracy theories, in the sense of I'm talking to an audience that I know will eat this stuff up, so I'm going to feed them all kinds of garbage because I know it's going to make them feel good, and they're going to cheer and holler and be happy and be nice to me and think well of me, even though I'm lying to them and setting them up and so on. But maybe that would be, let's see, unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial. Yeah, false flattery. I guess false flattery would fit that too. Same. That's true. Good. Okay, so next one. Factual, true, but unbeneficial, and endearing and agreeable to others.
Gossip.
Exactly. That's what I thought of too. Gossip. That's exactly what I've got down here. Gossip. It's true, but why are you telling it to this person? You're just gossiping about somebody else to get them to like you or to fit in or just have something to talk about, whatever. But it's hurtful to somebody else. Right? So gossip. Exactly. I think gossip's the best example of that. And then the last one, factual, true, beneficial, endearing, and agreeable to others. Right. But he has a sense of the proper time to say that. I thought that would be, like constructive criticism that the person's going to appreciate and receive well. Again, there'd be an appropriate time and place for that. Maybe not in front of other people, but it would still be useful to the person. So think about the timing of it. Okay. So I don't know. I hope that was a useful exercise. Thanissaro Bhikkhu, who's a pretty well-known modern Theravadan Western teacher, scholar, he wrote an essay about speech. This little paragraph from it I thought would be helpful. In positive terms, right speech means speaking in ways that are trustworthy, harmonious, comforting, and worth taking to heart. When you make a practice of these positive forms of right speech, your words become a gift to others. In response, other people will start listening more to what you say and will be more likely to respond in kind. This gives you a sense of power of your actions. The way you act in the present moment does shape the world of your experience. You don't need to be a victim of past events. So some real simple kind of guidance that fits in with these ideas in terms of when you're thinking about saying something, you're planning what you're going to respond in a conversation. Before you speak, what should you sort of ask yourself about what you're about to say? Is it true? Is it kind? Is it useful? Is it timely? Does it promote peace in the community? So if you keep in mind the idea that in Buddhism, morality is about intent, right? What's the motivation for the behavior? Is this more important to the morality than the consequences the behavior might have? So before we speak, we need to examine the intent, right? What's really motivating my desire to say this thing I'm thinking about saying? Is the speech coming from a place that's healthy, well-meaning, right? And we shouldn't necessarily trust the first thought we have about our own intent, because we may try to convince ourselves that something we want to say is okay, when it's really just a justification or a rationalization to make ourselves feel better about the speech, that if we kind of stopped and thought and kind of interrogated ourselves a little more deeply, we might realize it's problematic. I'm lying to myself a little bit by thinking this is really my intent, because really my intent is something else if I look at it at a deeper level. So you got to kind of triple check yourself to make sure you're really motivated in the way you think you are. Now I've been using the word speech this whole time, right? This whole thing's been about speech, but obviously this is a broader issue, right? And it's important to remember the era in which the Buddha was instructing his students. This was a verbal society, right? It was an oral society. Writing wasn't a big deal yet in his society. The scriptures themselves were transmitted orally for a couple hundred years, right? This was speech was communication. Communication was speech. All communication was speech. So obviously there was a focus on speech, but clearly the guidelines that he's offering here are more broadly about communication, right? Any kind of communication, not just about literally words coming out of our mouths. The same ideas about good. So you can really maybe think about it, rather than think about it as good speech and wrong speech, think of it as good communication, right? Bad communication, wrong communication. So because for good or bad, modern technologies make communication a lot easier. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot less filtered. It's a lot more permanent. It's just kind of more pernicious, right, because of all of these things. So all the same guidelines for speech can be applied to written communication, social media, any kind of communication. These same sort of principles apply there. So, mailing a letter, clicking send on an email, posting that online comment, uploading that video to TikTok, or the sending out that tweet, or whatever they're calling that now. I don't know, whatever they're calling it now, the X thing, right? The same questions I went through you apply there, right? Is it true? Is it kind? Is it useful? Is it timely? Does it promote peace in the community? Right. So we can use those as kind of if we can keep those things in mind, that can be kind of a filter for any kind of communication. Anybody have thoughts or comments or questions or anything any wisdom you want to add in your experience with speech?
Are there other translations for the word right? I've seen the list using the words wise.
Wise, productive, fruitful, right? Right and wrong. That's the simplest way to put it, but it has a connotation, right? That it's sort of judgmental. Wholesome, I like wholesome, right? Fruitful, right? That might be more kind of the spirit of the intent behind it, rather than the word right. Right goes with wrong, and there's kind of a moral, judgmental aspect to that. So I've seen a lot of authors use different words to translate it. I think maybe wholesome's my favorite one. Wholesome being, like if you think about like wholesome food, right? It's good for you, right? It's healthy. So if we're talking about speech, wholesome speech would be speech that's good for everybody and healthy for everybody. And, that might be a word that gets closer to what the Buddha really had in mind, even though right is used probably more often than anything else. A word like wholesome or something might be closer to the mark what the Buddha meant.
And wholesome takes into account the whole picture.
Well, that's true.
I mean,
more complete.
Right. I like that too.
Right. Because even if you think about speech, even if it's like a dyadic conversation between two people, it still can have ramifications that go outside of that, that can affect other people in the future and so on. So, yeah, that's true. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, I hope that was helpful.